there is a detail about Israel that almost never appears in the headlines, and it doesn't make sense at first glance. The country has more companies listed on NASDAQ than any entire European country. But here's the problem. Israel has no oil, no major navigable rivers, and has lived under constant pressure for decades. In theory, this scenario should limit any economy, but exactly the opposite happened. Israel became one of the world's leading technological powers. And this is not luck, nor coincidence. It is the result of an invisible system that almost no one explains. A system where scarcity turns into advantage and pressure turns into fuel. But there is an even deeper detail, and this is where almost everyone misunderstands Israel. By the end of this video, you will discover a fact about religion in the country that does not appear in guides, does not appear in the news, and that completely changes the way you understand all of this. And when you realize this connection, everything starts to make sense, or become even stranger. Israel is a small country, about 22,000 kilometers in total. For comparison, this means the entire country fits within regions that, in other places, would be considered just part of a state. But size is misleading, because within this relatively small area, there is a concentration of history, conflicts, cultures, and innovation that would normally require much larger territories. And this begins to create a dynamic that is not so obvious at first glance. In some areas, Israel is only 15 kilometers wide, enough to cross the country by car in about 10 minutes. This creates an almost unreal geographic feeling, where strategic distances are minimal and everything seems to be always too close. In other places, this would be an extreme vulnerability, and in a way it is. But here, this proximity also shapes quick decisions, immediate responses, and a type of mindset where time and space function in a very different way. Even though it is small, Israel contains 4 completely different climate zones: desert, Mediterranean climate, mountainous regions, and even a tropical valley. In just a few hours of travel, you can leave an arid area and reach a humid and fertile environment. This not only affects the landscape, it affects behavior, agriculture, and even the way people live day to day. And when a country brings together so much variation in such a small space, it begins to develop solutions that are not so intuitive. The Dead Sea, located in Israel, is about 430 meters below sea level, the lowest point on Earth's surface. The water is so rich in salt that the body simply does not sink, creating an almost surreal experience. But what seems merely touristic reveals something deeper. Living in an extreme environment requires constant adaptation, and this type of relationship with physical and natural limits ends up influencing much more than just the landscape. The Jordan River is one of the most symbolic places in the world, mentioned in religious texts for millennia. But in practice, it is a relatively short and shallow river by Middle Eastern standards. This difference between symbolic weight and physical reality creates an interesting contrast. Places that seem grand in imagination are, in everyday life, much more discreet. And this says a lot about how Israel functions, where meaning and reality do not always follow the same scale. Israel has more startups per capita than any other country in the world, more than 6,000 active companies. That is why it earned the nickname Startup Nation. But what is curious is not just the quantity, it is the speed at which ideas turn into real businesses. There is a culture where testing, failing, and trying again is part of the process. And this creates an environment where innovation is not the exception, it is routine. And this mindset begins to explain even more specific things. Some of the technologies you use today originated in Israel, even if you never
Okay, team, this is our core flow. We fetch data here, then process it.
What about the API rate limits?
Good catch. We'll use a queue to batch requests. So, no data loss? Exactly, we persisted.
Looks good.
Diagnostics. This shows that Israeli innovation is not only in startups, it is integrated into everyday global life. And when a country influences the world in this way, an even more interesting question begins to arise. The Iron Dome, an anti-missile defense system developed in Israel, has an interception rate above 90%. It detects threats in seconds and decides in real time which projectiles need to be neutralized. This is not just military technology, it is a direct reflection of a country that lives under constant risk. And when innovation is born from the need for daily protection, it gains a level of precision and urgency that would hardly be replicated in another context. Waze, a navigation app used by millions of people around the world, was born in Israel and was sold to Google for about $1.1 billion. The idea was simple: use data from the users themselves to find faster routes in real time. But the impact was huge. This shows how local solutions can scale globally when they solve real problems, and how in Israel, even everyday challenges become exportable innovation. Checkpoint, one of the pioneering companies in cybersecurity, also emerged in Israel and helped shape an entire sector. Today, the country is the third largest exporter of digital security technology in the world. This is not a coincidence. In an environment where threats are constant, protecting information becomes a strategic priority. And when security becomes part of everyday life, it stops being just defense and becomes one of the strongest engines of innovation. Israel was refounded as a modern state in 1948, after nearly 2,000 years, without existing as a sovereign nation. And there is an even more unusual detail. It is the only known case of a people who revived a language considered dead, Hebrew, and transformed it into an official everyday language. This is not just a historical fact. It is an active cultural reconstruction. And when identity needs to be rebuilt like this, it ends up shaping behavior in unexpected ways. Modern Hebrew did not simply come back into use, it had to be reconstructed. In the 19th century, the linguist Eliezer ben Yehuda created thousands of words to adapt the biblical language to the modern world. Terms for simple, everyday things simply did not exist and had to be invented. This means that the language millions of people use today was in part designed. And when even the language is built like this, it begins to influence how people think. Israel is the only country in the Middle East classified as a full democracy by various international indexes. This means regular elections, multiple parties, and formal political freedom, something uncommon in the region. But at the same time, this democracy coexists with constant internal and external tensions. The result is a dynamic political system, often unstable but extremely participatory, and this combination creates an environment where decisions are rarely simple nor unanimous. The population of Israel is made up of Jews who came from more than 70 different countries, each bringing their own culture, cuisine, and even way of speaking. This creates an internal mix that is not just diversity. It is almost a cultural mosaic in constant adaptation. In the same neighborhood, you can find completely different habits coexisting side by side. And when so many references meet in such a small space, social patterns emerge that are not so predictable. About 20% of Israel's population is made up of Arabs, Muslims and Christians who have the right to vote and participate in parliament, the Knesset. This creates an internal reality that many people from outside do not perceive, different identities coexisting within the same political system. At the same time, this coexistence is not free of tension. And it is precisely this combination of participation and conflict that helps explain why the country functions in such a particular way. The weekend in Israel does not follow the pattern of most of the world. There, the days of rest are Friday and Saturday because of Shabbat, and Sunday works as a normal business day. This affects everything: transportation, commerce, the rhythm of the city, and even social commitments. For those coming from outside, this inversion may seem confusing at first, but in practice it reveals how ancient traditions continue to organize the modern functioning of the country. During Shabbat, some religious rules affect even simple things like using an elevator. In religious buildings, there is the so-called Shabbat mode. The elevator automatically stops on every floor so that no one needs to press buttons, which is avoided for religious reasons. For those who do not know, this seems strange, until you realize that small everyday actions also follow invisible rules, and this begins to show how tradition and technology coexist in a very specific way. Israel recycles more than 90% of all wastewater, a rate that no other country comes close to. This treated water is used mainly in agriculture, allowing arid regions to become productive. This is not just efficiency. It is necessity turned into a system. In a place where scarcity is constant, wasting is not an option. And this logic ends up influencing not only infrastructure, but the way the country thinks about solutions in other areas. Israel practically has no conventional natural resources, but it has managed to transform desert areas into productive agricultural zones using drip irrigation. This technology delivers water directly to the roots of plants, avoiding waste and maximizing efficiency. The most interesting part is that this did not remain restricted to the country. It became a global export. When a place learns to produce under difficult conditions, it ends up creating solutions that work anywhere. In Israel, military service is mandatory for practically everyone, men and women. Women serve for about 2 years, men for 3, and many combat units have full gender integration, something rare in the world. This means that a large part of the population shares a common experience at the beginning of adult life. And when a country goes through this collectively, it creates social bonds and a mindset that influence far beyond the military context. Jerusalem is the only city in the world considered sacred at the same time for Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And in some places, these practices occur just a few meters apart. This creates a rare overlap of meanings in the same physical space. It is not just a city. It is a point of global spiritual convergence. And when different places share the same symbolic territory, every detail of daily life begins to carry a weight that is not always visible. The Temple Mount, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is located, is one of the most sensitive places in the world. And interestingly, it has been administered by Jordan since 1967. Jews can visit the site, but they cannot pray out loud there. This rule is not only related to religion, but to an extremely delicate political balance. And when even the way of behaving in a space needs to be regulated like this, it becomes clear that there are invisible layers organizing everything. There is a constant tension within Israel that is not so visible to those looking from outside. The conflict between religious and secular groups. Ultra-Orthodox Jews, known as Haredim, are exempt from military service and form an influential political group. This generates intense debates about equality, duty, and national identity. And when different rules apply to different groups, the country begins to function with multiple logics at the same time. Tel Aviv is one of the most LGBT-friendly cities in the world, with one of the largest pride parades in the region. But just 60 kilometers away, Jerusalem maintains much more conservative religious customs. These are two completely different environments coexisting in the same country. For those observing from outside, this seems contradictory. But within Israel, this coexistence is part of normal functioning. And understanding this may be one of the keys to decoding the country. Israel does not have a formal constitution to this day. Instead, the country operates with a set of basic laws that have been approved over time. This happens in part because there has never been consensus between religious and secular groups about what the fundamental text of the state should be. The result is a flexible system, but also one open to disputes, and perhaps this detail explains more about Israel than any other point in this video. It functions as a system where contradictions are not a problem to be solved. They are the basis of its own functioning. Cutting-edge technology coexisting with millennia-old traditions. Political freedom coexisting with extremely specific rules. Completely opposite environments separated by just a few kilometers. And when you begin to realize this, one thing changes. You stop trying to fit the place into familiar pattern and start observing the invisible rules that actually organize human behavior there. And maybe that is the biggest lesson, not only about Israel, but about any place in the world. If this type of content makes you see the world with different eyes, subscribe to the channel, because there are many more hidden layers waiting to be revealed.